Is this guy ever going to get out of his basement again? Today we want to talk about how to rock your entire body properly through your X-Step to achieve maximum coil and force on the disc. Now, part of the reason that I find this move so compelling is that it's relatively complicated for the body to execute. And what I wanted to do is give you a couple of pointers, building on this concept of rocking the whole body from last time to help you navigate building your X-Step. So if I were going to give you the problem of rocking a baby, how would you go about doing that? Even if you don't have a baby, we can intuitively understand that, whether or not that tyke is just born or a year in, they're going to weigh somewhere between 8 and 20 pounds. And there's a lot of ways you could rock that baby that would be more or less efficient and that would give you more or less effort as you swung that baby. And so we could mostly swing with our arms. We know we don't want to do that. We could more intuitively swing with our entire body. So using those pogo legs we talked about last time, we would pogo back and forth to gently rock that baby. And we could do it over a little narrow range of motion. We could do it over a bigger range of motion. And if we should so choose, we could rock the baby back and release it and rock that baby forward and release it. I don't advise doing that with the baby. If we do that with the disc, we're recovering that same concept. And so you'll notice that if a lot of pros are walking through their X-Step, they've got the disc cradled. We want to be hugging the disc, not our own body, to avoid rounding. And it'll look often quite a bit like a dance pose. So they'll have the arms around here, creating a balance point, arms forward and around that disc. And as they're striding through, there's a natural balance of those arms over the legs. And if we get our arms too far ahead of our legs, we're going to be out of leverage and lose force. If we go too far back, same problem in that direction. And so we always want to be cradling and rocking that disc fundamentally with our body, our center of gravity. And we want that center of gravity to lead the disc. And so if we go running like the blazes through the X-Step, but if at the very end we fail to rock correctly into that plant and achieve that not flat swing plane that we'd like to achieve, we're going to lose a lot of that power. And that's why you see, part of the reason why you see a lot of players running through that X-Step, and it doesn't matter how much extra speed they're adding with their feet, they could be running full tilt, they're getting very bad transfer. There are also folks that can throw pretty far without having a complete rock. And so this idea of putting that complete rock into the swing to add maximum coil and uncoil and put as much good torque into that disc as possible is critical. So when we're rocking the baby and we're walking, the problem is that where our feet are can really get us into trouble. And so this concept of footwork is related to how the body can rock throughout the X-Step. And so the reason I advise so much work in standstills is a lot of players have this rear foot especially turned too far back, or they imagine lead with their butt, but they're essentially walking backwards. You might have heard this. Now, even if they have their feet relatively squared up to the target, they might be actually still twisting and torquing through the hips as they walk in some kind of fashion that we'd like to avoid. And if they rock into that plant, they might not have landed in such a way that they can get that counterbalance action through the hit. So when we're rocking the baby, we can do this in a couple of different ways. And I think, again, doing this first with a weight will help you intuitively understand it. So let's first grab our weight.
Such as a baby.
Now that we have our weight, we would like to assume a cradle rocking position. And what I want you to first do is start, you don't need too much space, maybe around 8 or 10 feet or so. And I want you to find a natural rock, just like we did in the standstill. And I want you to notice that if you keep your feet in a somewhat neutral position braced up, I could backswing the way I would for a standstill. I could swing forward and try to impart that maximum force onto the disc. And we want to maintain this motion as we stride. So first, before we X-Step, let's just shuffle. So you'll notice as I bring that rock up this way, it's tending to help pull my rear foot with it. That rear foot is pushing off the ground as it helps push that weight out toward the target. The weight moving further helps collect the leg forward. And notice that this is the basis already of counterbalancing. If I were to heave that hammer out there, my leg would naturally collect. And so we're just going to shuffle sideways at first, shuffle step, and notice I'm rocking back, that I'm getting leverage on that rear leg that's helping me maintain balance before I swing forward again. So that's one of the critical keys in the X-Step that you often see missing in form, is that there's not balance on both legs throughout the swing. Now, as we talked about last time, if you're rocking low like this, you'll notice these shin angles coming in and out very naturally without torquing my knees. That's the same kind of action we want in this rear leg as we shift forward throughout the X-Step. And the reason that we want that is because that's giving us some optimal balance. It's the back half of that figure eight action we talked about. And that figure eight action is responsible for providing a lot of the good torque that we want to provide maximum coil and uncoil and impart that on the disc. Okay? And so we take that shuffle move. We've got that figure eight action, rocking here, shuffle, 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 shuffle. Okay, let's get to the X-Step. Okay, so we observe that when we shuffle forward with the hammer, we can help have it assist that foot assists the move forward. Now we're going to cross behind. And so what we're going to notice here, and another critical piece that is often missing, is that as this hammer comes up, I could be crossing my foot behind instead of laterally, and this should feel like one fluid rocking motion. And so I want to rock forward, cross, forward. And I could continue to rock forward and cross in that direction. So I recommend this alone as a drill, just forward, cross, forward, cross, forward. And so notice that I've got the weight contained, swinging with my chest back and forth. Notice that my hips are rocking very naturally as part of that action. And I'm never out of balance. I'm never completely falling one way or the other because I'm braced up within my neutral foot position. Okay? And so if we now take that forward and swing, rock, forward, swing, we can start to get the feeling for that hit point on the disc. So you can practice this a couple of ways, and I want to talk just a minute about hopping versus striding. If you watch especially someone like Simon Lizotte or Eagle McMahon, it appears as though they're striding fluidly along the ground and there's no hop in it. It also might not look super obvious to you that there's a rocking action. Watch them very closely. You can see it when they're either doing small upshots or when they're doing longer drives. Especially in the backswing, look for that rock back as they leave the disc behind, so to speak. But you'll often notice that same rocking action moving forward is just a much smaller pump. And in fact, across tournaments even, you'll see variable levels of pump. The pros have compressed that rocking action and those pumps down, presumably for efficiency, right? And there's more consistency and they swing. But I really advise that you exaggerate these actions first. So there are two moves here we want to get used to doing. We want to be able to move our body by swinging that X forward, like we talked about, to release that. We also want to use this weight to help us rise relative to the ground and then swing. Now, again, Garrett Gurthey's a really obvious case where he's got a lot of vertical component for his force, big stocky guy. But if you watch closely and then start to get the feel for this action, you'll notice that part of what Eagle and Simon are doing is essentially this hidden hop. They're keeping their feet in very controlled contact with the ground. However, as they're shifting forward over this front leg, relative to that leg, there's rising in their center of gravity that is pulling that weight along and off the ground, which they then land and then get lower into the plant step to release the swing. So this is what's often missing in a lot of X-steps in developing players. They don't have this mastery of the vertical and the horizontal components, and rocking action can help you to learn it. So if we're going to work on this more vertical component, we still want it to be swinging toward the target. We're going to take an X-step. And so you could see there how I used that hammer swing to carry my momentum up before I strode forward. And if you're not used to this, and you can tell even as I'm practicing this, this isn't the most practiced action for me, that I'm going to need to seek that leverage and balance off this rear leg again. And that transition move is one of the most critical pieces of a high-level swing, because if you don't have good leverage and balance to create that rhythm for the swing forward and to create something that's braced up for us to create that sling, you're going to lose a lot of potential power out of it, not to say losses of consistency downrange. And so these two moves, either striding pretty close to the ground with a small rock, and swinging out, so always swinging out through that high leverage position that you might find with a hammer, or swinging through that move to move up and over before we swing is what we'd like to drill. And then as you practice that, you can get more and more practiced as you move through that transition. So if we swing forward here, swing up, forward, and you want to find a way to land in a position that is going to give you wherever you found that most leverage, right? And so give that a shot, and then either get out there with a target or do some field work, and hopefully you can start to get this fundamental rocking action into your swing.